Never begin a class with an apology. But I left my Romanian language at home. Really, I never had it, but maybe by the end of next week, I will learn more. So in starting with 0, I can only learn more, yes? If there is something that you do not understand, any question that you have, do not be afraid to stop me, and we will talk, we will translate, we will do whatever is necessary to help you to understand. Okay? So, our objective in this class, our overwhelming objective, is to help you as dietitians to be, to make certain that the work that you are doing is going to make a difference to the patient that you're serving. Too often, I see dietitians spending a lot of time developing a special modified diet, only to have that diet completely turned upside down in the kitchen. It does not do what you wanted. It is not the best for the patient. So I think that it is important for us to be able to understand what is happening in the kitchen so that we can work together with the management of the kitchen so that we optimize, make best use of the materials, the foods, the information that we're providing to the patient to make it the very best. Okay? Did you understand what I've said?
Yes.
Any problems? Okay. Well, we'll continue from there then. So we're going to spend the next 10 days talking about food systems management. Not for you to become necessarily a manager, but it's okay. It's right here. Not necessarily that you will be a manager, but you will be able to communicate and to understand the management process that is going on as far as food production is concerned. Now, it may be that some of you will become food service managers. And whether you are in clinical, that is medical nutrition therapy, or in food systems management, this applies to both situations. Okay? I want to stop for just a moment. The PowerPoint presentations that we have, I will make available to you. And if we can get, if you want them, you don't have to have them, but if you give me your email address, I will send them to you tonight so that you will have them, and then I could also send you what we're going to do tomorrow so that you will have it in advance. Okay? When I use the word global understanding, I mean by that being able to see the big picture, to be able to see everything that is happening within the organization and being able to modify or to improve the way in which the organization works. And so, the global understanding is that food service systems are open systems. I'm going to explain each of these in a great amount of detail in just a moment. but this is just a bare introduction. Every decision that you and I make that is involved in the system will impact, make a difference in that system in many different ways. Similar outputs can be achieved using different inputs. So there's more than one way that we can achieve our objective. That's one of the important principles. And then finally, strategic management is important for our success. One of my favorite sayings is, food does not just happen. There are too many people who say, I would like some food. Give me a sandwich. How much work is there involved in making a sandwich? If we were to do a time and motion study of the amount of time it takes to make just one sandwich, or 100 sandwiches, it's probably one of the most labor-intensive activities that we can do. So just make me a sandwich is probably not the best response to our desire for food. Or don't go to any trouble. Just make something. But I say this to emphasize the point that food is a process that is not just something that happens, but is carefully planned and produced. Or, I'm not very hungry, but give me something. Not specific does not really help to answer the question, what do we need for nutrition? So we have individuals ready to help, but we've got to be able to communicate to them what they need to do in order to provide the food that is really necessary. But what really happens in the production of food? What about the raw food supplies? Where does that come from? Has that been already delivered? Is it available to us? Do we have individuals, our employees, who know how to do the work that is necessary? Are they skilled, in other words? And what equipment or facilities do we have in order to make the food that is desired? So, in our role as a food service manager, or someone who is interrelating to a food service manager, we are dealing with an understanding of the preparation of the food, but not only that, the management of the preparation of food. And so, a definition that I would like to give to you is that in the preparation of food for quantities within a hospital setting, for example, we're going to use special equipment, we're going to use trained cooks, and we're going to use specific methods to prepare meals for 50 or more people. Now, my wife's mother was the wife of a farmer. And during harvest time, in August and September, she would have to feed 75 people or more, the harvest crew. These harvest crews were her brother-in-laws, friends, people who come from a long distance to help with harvest, but they were all members of the family. So she prepared those 75 meals in her farm kitchen. No large pieces of equipment, just large pans that were put onto her regular stove. She was not trained as a cook, but was able to prepare food for large numbers. And I would give her the fact that she used specific methods. And she was preparing meals for 50 or more people. Based upon our definition, was she a manager of food service systems? She prepared more than 50. She used specific methods, but she was not trained as a cook. She did not have special equipment. And so I must say that she was not a professional food systems manager. And so I would like for you to understand that these 4 areas are important in defining the kind of individual that we are dealing with in an institutional food service. So let's take a look at each of these 4 areas. First is the special equipment. Equipment's designed for sanitation, meaning that it can be cleaned easily, that it's not going to burn on the bottom, so that you have to have difficulty in cleaning the bottom. In my early years in the profession, that was my job, washing the big pots, and all of the food that was burned on the bottom I had to scrub and wash and make clean so that the cooks could do it once again, that is, to burn. We want to also make certain that they have the capacity. That is, the pieces of equipment are large enough to feed that 75 or 300 meals that we have to prepare. So we've got to look very, very carefully then at the capacity of our equipment and the kind of equipment so that it is meeting our needs and that it is going to have a long life. I was the director of the food service at Loma Linda University Medical Center. I began that job in 1984, 84 to 94, and the equipment that we had was brought in, was purchased when the hospital opened in 1967. So from 1967 to 1984, the equipment looked good. We are now in 2012. Much of the equipment, stainless steel equipment, looks just as good as when I was director there many years ago, and very similar to the way that it looked when it was first put in 1967. So it has a long length of life. There are some pieces of equipment that don't have a long, long life. Let's take a look at some of them. The piece of equipment that is on the table that has a yellow front, that is a low-pressure steamer or an atmospheric steamer, no pressure. That one is in good condition. At the medical center, we've had to replace those pieces of equipment 3 or 4 times over the last 40 or 50 years because they don't last forever. But there are some things that do last seemingly forever. And then the last piece of equipment that is down there is a combi oven. Do you know what a combi oven is? It was developed here in Europe. It is a combination steam and oven so that you can cook more efficiently. It's a wonderful piece of equipment. So we'll spend some time as we look at equipment learning more about the combi oven. So there is a close-up view of the steamer on the left and the combi oven on the right. Now we've been talking about training. We've been talking about equipment and the equipment that is used by a professional food service manager. But also we need to talk about training, and that we have to provide knowledge and skill as our role in management to our employees. So we are going to be involved in training over a long period of time. Consistent training. We're going to train them in the area of food preparation. They may know how to cook before they come to work for you, but I think before we go home today, we'll understand a little bit more of the need for food to be prepared to meet our standards, standards that are essential in providing food for our patients. We also need to have training in food presentation, making food look wonderful. People begin to eat with their eyes before they put it in their mouth. And so as a result of that, the way that food is presented is critical. And then we also need to train our staff on nutrient content. How do we maximize the retention of nutrients in the cooking process? If we overcook food, nutrient content is reduced. As one example. In terms of preparing vegetables and preparing other foods, we want to know where those nutrients are in the food so that we will retain those. Now the third area is that of special methods. And that may involve the cooking techniques, standard cooking techniques that our employees may not know, or they need some retraining. They need to know how to follow a standardized recipe. Do you know what a standardized recipe is? Have you been taught about that? Should we talk about that for a minute? Okay. Have you ever been to a restaurant and you choose the restaurant because the food there, you have a very special menu item that you like from that facility? You go to the restaurant and it's just not the same. It doesn't taste good, it doesn't look good, and you complain to the waitress or waiter. And the response often given is, the regular cook is off tonight. The cook is not following a standardized recipe so that the ingredients are specified in terms of how much of each ingredient, what is done in combining those ingredients, and the way in which it is prepared so that it looks the same, tastes the same, meets all of the standards that you have in mind in going to that restaurant. And so particularly if that special menu item that you have in mind that you want for tonight does not meet your quality standards, what are you going to do about it? Maybe not go to that restaurant anymore. Hopefully you maybe give them another chance. But I think we need to tell them that we were unhappy with the meal tonight, so that they can take corrective action. So I am arguing for consistency in the way in which we're preparing food. And then batch production is another thing that we will talk about. And batch production is a special method in which food is prepared in small portions over several different times so that the food is as fresh as possible. Here I'm talking specifically about vegetable preparation, but it would apply to some meats. It would apply to some other things, like if you were roasting a meat product, you could put one batch in every 15 or 20 minutes. And so that as it comes out, it is ready to go to the serving line, maximizing the appearance and the nutritional quality of the food product. Are there any questions? Are you understanding what I'm saying? Am I going too slow? Am I going too fast? Give me feedback as necessary, and I can modify. Okay? What I would like to do now is to talk a little bit about what is in the last part of the first chapter. By the way, there will be a final test at the end of this class, maybe in June, not now, so that you'll have time to really study. But the last part of the first chapter, I do not cover very much on the test, and I don't cover very much in discussion. But I think it's important for us to take a look anyway at where food service really came from. What is our history? Where did it start? Well, in terms of hospitals, hospitals were not very common. The first hospital that still exists is St. Bartholomew's Hospital in London, and it dates from the 11th century. And so that is the oldest hospital in continuous operation. So that is what? More years than I have been around, and that you have been around, or all of us have been around. But what was the menu like at St. Bartholomew's Hospital when it began? Any idea? Do you think they had a selective menu where they could choose any number of food items that they wanted? Porridge and beer. Why beer? The water was not fit to drink. It was contaminated water. So beer at least had been decontaminated, and so it was safe to drink. But if we look to the beginning of the 19th century, not so long ago in terms of the whole scheme of history, 200 years ago, what was the major menu items in healthcare in Europe and in America? Porridge and beer. Not much.
What does porridge contain?
What does porridge contain? Like oatmeal. It's a cereal that's been cooked for a long time. So that's about it. Wheat corn, rye, or a combination of them. Yeah, so, yeah. So not much progress was made. And it wasn't until the Crimean War, 1850s, 1860s, somewhere like that, where real efforts were made to provide food for soldiers who had been injured in the war. More soldiers died from disease than from being shot or being actually involved in the war. It was the disease that went along with it. And so that's when care of the patients really began, both in Europe and in America, but it began here in Europe. But there are some other examples of quantity food production. Inns to accommodate pilgrims who were going to Rome or going other places, and so they may have had a lot of visitors. Religious orders also had large numbers of people that lived in the community, in the religious community, and so there was quantity food production there, in royal households and in nobility. Would you like to take a little trip to England for a moment? Let's do that. I didn't need to do what I did, I think, but what we want to do is to go back to the time of Henry VIII. Do you have any idea what food was like at that time? Here we go. This is Hampton Court on the Thames River on the east side of London. And this is where Henry VIII lived. But how did Henry VIII eat? Have you seen pictures of Henry VIII? Huge. Very happy. This is the way in which they prepared food. And that would be the table that they would have. Meat and meat accompaniments. The pastry that you see there is like a kidney pie. Another view of the table. More kidney pie. Any idea what this is? Yes. This is food preparation table. Any difference between what we saw a little while ago in the stainless steel equipment and the equipment here? Just a little bit. Here is where fresh vegetables from the fields were brought in and prepared. The bakery where the kidney pies were made. This is one of the areas where stews and soups and other kinds of foods were prepared. There was a wood underneath to provide heat for cooking. But there were also fireplaces. We saw one fireplace, but this one is a very special one, and it has a little mechanism that will turn the meat in front of the oven. And so this is a better view of it. It's like a clock that has a weight on it, and so you have to pull the weight up, and then it will gradually move down, and the meat will rotate so that it doesn't burn. This is another part of the kitchen where greens are again prepared. This is a better view of that kitchen where there is charcoal or other sources of heat for cooking in smaller quantities. Here's yet another fireplace where they did not have that mechanism to turn the meat, but it had to be done by hand. Very much the same. Unfortunately, I should have taken that out. But another area where food is prepared. And this is the butchery, where animals are brought in, the deer and the hogs, and they are taken care of in the court of Henry VIII. Anyone care to go back to the time of Henry VIII and prepare food? I think that may be what we will not do that, but we will take advantage of the opportunities that we have now. And so that is nobility. And they lived in other kinds of castles and other places. These two castles are from Slovakia, sorry. I want to see some of the castles I have seen some of the castles of Romania, and I really enjoy them. That was an introduction, and so what I'd like to do for the next little while is to talk about the systems approach to food service management. The systems approach is a specific way that we approach problems associated with the preparation and service of food. Now, first of all, the systems approach is recognition that pieces of a whole group of pieces work together to achieve a common goal or a common objective. And so our goal as managers of food service is to understand how the pieces work together, the pieces that we have just been talking about, and how we can put those pieces together in an optimum manner. Optimum meaning the very best to achieve our goal. It may not be the best for someone else, but it is best for us. So there is no one perfect system. The system is based upon what your needs, your goals, and what your objectives are. Okay? Now let's look at some of the vocabulary that is used in systems thinking and talking about systems. When we talk about a system, we're talking about the pieces that we have direct control over. So if we were the director of a food service, we would be responsible then for a number of things like the employees, the money, the equipment, and everything that is used to prepare a meal. And so we can talk about that as a system. But we also talk about subsystems. Subsystems are smaller components of the system. So again, for our use right now, we'll talk about the system as the food service department. The subsystems are going to be the cook's area, where the cooking is done, where the food is purchased. That's going to be a system. Where the food is stored, that's going to be a subsystem. The washing of the dishes, and the sanitation, that is going to be a subsystem. So a subsystem is a fully functioning system but the sub means relationship. It's a part of the larger. So in a hospital setting, the food service is a subsystem of the entire hospital. The hospital is a subsystem of the entire health delivery system of Romania. And on and on and on. So we're talking only, when we talk about subsystems, as relationship, larger and smaller. Nothing more special than that. The other thing that we need to understand is interface. And interface is where one subsystem will interact with another subsystem. And if you rub your hands together, or if you rub sticks together, what happens? It gets hot. And where subsystems interface, friction happens and things can get hot. For example, in my hospital anyway, between the delivery of food to the patient and the nursing service, there was often friction that occurred. This was an interface between one department and another. And so this is a relationship that is there, and one of our responsibilities as a systems manager is to manage that interface, to reduce and or eliminate all of that friction, or as much as possible that we can of that friction. Sub-optimization. The root word here is optimum, the best, given the situations that we have. Sub-optimization is maybe not really where we would like to be, but that's where we are. Now, I'm going to give you an example that is silly, but I think it will point out the term sub-optimization. In the hospitals, we have special diets. And for each different disease or condition, there is a modified diet that is appropriate. But in terms of food service, I want to have an optimum department. So I'm going to do away with all special diets. Everyone will get the same food. That means that I can assemble and deliver my trays much more quickly. I'm very productive, and as a result of that, the physicians and the nurses and the patients and everyone is going to say, stop it, we don't want it. We want modified food. And we could take it even one step further and say, why don't we just put all of the nutrients that we need into a capsule, and you just take that capsule and everything will be fine. That would be the best for food service. But is it best for the patient? No. So sub-optimization is saying that sometimes we need to do things less productively in such a way that may not be the best for us as a department, but it is best for the entire system, for the entire hospital. So we become less perfect, less optimum, in order that the whole system can be even better than what it was before. Does that make sense in terms of sub-optimization? Okay. Interdependency. Subsystems relate one to another. And so they relate. The food production has an interdependency with food purchasing. If there's no food purchasing, there's no food to prepare. So there's a relationship and interdependency there. Within the system, we also find dynamic equilibrium. Dynamic means change, ever changing. And there is an implication there of power or force behind that dynamic thing. But then the equilibrium part is going to say that we need to have a balance within our organization. So we have things that are coming at us from many different directions. And our role as a manager of the system is to control these forces in such a way that our system can still be productive and that it will be successful in achieving the system goals. Okay? And then the last one, equifinality. That means that we can, well, I don't know, do you have this saying in Romania that all roads lead to Rome? Or, yeah, okay. So that is the meaning of this, that whichever way you go, you can still achieve your objective. And so there are many ways in which we can achieve our objective. There's not one best way. And so I think that is a real advantage of systems management, that we can achieve our goals in many different directions. I want you to become very, very, very familiar with this chart that I have on the board. It's not difficult, but it is a model of a system. The basic components or elements of a system is right through the center. The input, the transformation, and the output. That is basically what we are managing in a food service. We're managing the input, we are managing the transformation, the actual preparation and service of the food, so that we are producing an output, a meal that is served to the patient, or a meal that is served to our guest. That is the output of our system. Let's briefly look at some of the other, what we would refer to here as a subsystem. Input, transformation, and output are subsystems. Control is a subsystem as well. And let's begin by looking at some of the aspects of control. Plans are things that we wish to accomplish, and that becomes a controlling aspect of what we do in the department. And we can talk about standing and single-use plans, but we'll talk about that a bit later. Goals and objectives are part of our control. Standards, policies and procedures, and programs are examples of control. For the rest of our time together, we're going to be talking about control. This week and next week. Control is a very important part of what we do. Another of the subsystems is feedback at the bottom. Feedback provides information, a flow of information from output to the input. And if I were drawing this, I would also put an arrow to transformation. Let me give you a reason why. We get a complaint from a patient saying the food is cold. Is it a problem with the input? No, it's a problem with transformation. Part of the transformation is the assembly and distribution of patient trays. And if that is not done in an appropriate manner, the food will be cold. And so that's where we need to have that information go, not to input. But I think it needs to go to both places. It needs to go to input as well as transformation. The other box that we see is memory. This is where we maintain records of financial records, which we'll talk about before the end of this 2 weeks. Personnel, again, we'll talk about. And forecasting, we'll talk about that as well. So that is part of the system to help us to remember what has gone on before so that we can improve upon what's gone on before, make changes, and always improve what we are doing. Now, there are some other parts of this model that I think that we need to talk about, and that is this arrow right here. That arrow is saying that there is a relationship that is occurring between all of those subsystems of the food service systems model. So there is constant communication that is going on. We see another arrow that goes across the box, across the line under the box output. That is saying that there is interrelationships between the environment and the food service department. And so this is a very important part of what we are doing as well, is that we are interacting with the environment. Remember, we were talking about global factors, about systems at the very, very beginning. And we said that systems are open and not closed. An open system is defined as one that interacts with its environment. Is there a system that is closed? Can you think of a closed system? Pieces or parts that do not interact with the environment. If there was such a system, and there is not, it would be a perpetual motion machine. Do you know what I mean by that? A number of years ago in Arizona, United States, there was Biosphere. Did you hear about Biosphere? It was an effort on the part of a number of scientists to see if humans can exist in a closed environment. They had to grow their own food. They had to provide for everything that they needed within their own environment. There was no interaction between inside the environment and outside the environment. Was it successful? It was a failure. It did not work. So, the fact that we are dealing with an open system is very, very important, because we are bringing in what we need from the exterior. Thank you. And we are then exporting what we have made into the environment of the department. So we are taking meals and serving them to our guests in the cafeteria or to our patients in the wards. So there is a very open concept as far as the food service system is concerned. Let's take a look now at the basic three elements of our system. The first is input. Input is like human input, like labor and skills that are brought into the system, essential for us to achieve our goals. Materials, the food and supplies that we use, are essential there as well. The facilities, the equipment, the space that we occupy is part of the input. Operational factors such as money, time, electricity, natural gas, even information is going to be useful in our input. And I would like to suggest that technology may also be part of that as it is reflected in the equipment that we use. But technology is also going to be showing itself in terms of transformation. You see there 3 different ovals: functional subsystems, management functions, and linking processes. These are all elements in transformation. My background, my education at the doctoral level primarily, is focusing right there at that part of transformation. It's called operations management. And so that's what the food service manager is an operations manager, using mathematical skills, human relations skills, all the skills that they can develop in order to make that transformation process as efficient as possible. Let's talk about functional subsystems. Actually, we have already talked about them, but I'm going to repeat them from this point so that it's very clear as to what the functional subsystems are. Procurement, storage, production, service, distribution, and sanitation. 6. So those are the things that we are focusing on in terms of the functional subsystems that we use to transform inputs into a meal. Let's look at management functions. We're going to come back and talk about all of these in much greater depth, and so this is much more of an introduction. Management functions of planning, organizing, directing or leading, controlling, and evaluating. Those are important parts of management. And then linking is decision-making. It is providing balance within the organization, and communication. Those 3, balance, communication, and decision-making, are essential as far as the linking processes, and linking all of these components together so that we are preparing a system that is going to work very well for us. Let's ask a question or two. You are a food service manager, and procurement ordered oranges as they should have. Your standard says that you wanted oranges of the size 113, but what happened is they sent size 88 oranges. I'll talk about what that means. If you have a standard box, and a size 88 orange is that you can get 88 oranges in that box and still get the lid on. A 113 size is saying you're going to get 113 oranges in that box. So now from a systems point of view, what's wrong? What are the potential problems that we're going to have to face? And so by looking at the systems model, we can predict some of the impact that this has or will cause us. What do you see as an immediate problem? Money? In what way?
You have to
Okay, so you have spent more money for orange than what you were expecting to. And the other thing I think that is obvious is that there are 25 people that will not get an orange because you ordered for 113, but you only got 88. So there is some difference there. So your cost per serving is what you were talking about, and your shortage are two immediate problems that we've got to deal with. Are there any other problems? One problem that I see is that what is the nutritional value in a size 113 orange? How many calories, for example, compared to a size 88 orange? It's going to have more calories in the size 88, and so if we give those to our patients and we're trying to control the caloric intake, we have given them too many calories. And so as a result of that, our planning as far as our diet is gone because someone messed up in terms of purchasing. And so that's going to affect you in terms of what you have planned for your patient. Does that make sense? Okay. Another systems question. The baker, it's discovered, has used salt rather than sugar in making cookies. How do you find out about those problems?
Taste them.
Taste them. And tasting them is really evaluation. It's a management function. The reason I give this is because this happened to me. When I was a student and I got into all manner of difficulty and problems because I did not find out that the bakers that morning had used salt rather than sugar in the cookies. So, let alone the fact that the cookies were inedible, if a patient who was on a low sodium diet had eaten that cookie, what had happened to the diet? So, food service, medical nutrition therapy have to work together in order to attain common goals. Number 3, the food budget is overspent. There's no more money for food. What are we going to do? Do we have a problem? No, I think so, yes. This too is a problem that I got myself into. And very early in my career, the food budget was $1.05 for every patient's day. So everything that the patient ate for one day, we were to spend $1.05. Well, you know that that wasn't yesterday or today. It was 40 years ago. And so we got money on a continual basis, but the problem is that we were spending more than we were authorized to spend. So we needed to make some changes. So we essentially looked at our systems model and said, what is it that we need to change? Do we need to change labor? Probably not, because the issue is food, not labor. But what we've got to do is to go back and change the menu. We had menu items on our menu that were very, very expensive. We had lobster on our menu. That's not a very cost-effective entree for a patient. These patients, by the way, were soldiers. They were not civilian people. we wanted to do our very best for them, but at the same time, we were overspending. So what we had to do was to change our menu. We had to take lobster off. We had to take steak off, and we replaced it with hamburger. Hamburger this and hamburger that. Everywhere was hamburger in order for us to control our food cost. Then, once when the food cost came back in line, that we were not spending more than we should have, that took about 5 months, by the way, we were then able to add more desirable foods onto the menu so that there was satisfaction on the part of our soldiers, our patients. Okay, what I'm going to do is we're going to take a little break, and we are going to come back and do something practical. At least I hope that it's practical. And so, given the systems model, predict the impact of one of these things. Food on the menu is unavailable, or the cooks do not know how to prepare one of the menu items, or the cooks peel potatoes by hand, and potatoes are on the menu every day. What is going to be the system impact of each one of those? And so, when we come back from the break, what I'd like for you to do is to get into small groups and talk amongst yourself as to what the possible outcomes and solutions are for each of those problems. I've just done 3 for you. Not this number 3, but I've gone over 3 examples that we were just talking about, where we had used more money, food money, than what we should have. So we're going to use the same processes and evaluate these 3 problems that occur in food service.